Native Americans possess a rich culture and unique traditions, but perhaps the most interesting aspect of Native culture is the vast number of languages that have been spoken for generations. In Love Medicine, Louise Erdrich includes her native Ojibwe language in her writing along with English. By including the dying Ojibwe language, this juxtaposes American culture with Native culture and opens a discussion on the struggles Natives face when forced to assimilate. Some possible issues that result from this may include identity crises, emotional turmoil, and feelings of marginalization in politics and other areas. Throughout this presentation, we will elaborate on the nuances of the Ojibwe language, address examples of this language in the Love Medicine short stories, and then view these quotes from a broader scope and explore the importance of Native language in modern culture.
The Ojibwe is still one of the largest Native American tribes in North America today. The Ojibwe language is a central Algonquian language spoken by the Anishinaabe people centered around the Great Lakes homeland. This land spreads throughout Canada from Ontario to Manitoba and throughout the United States border states from Michigan to Montana.
This language is spoken mainly by elders now, and a recent ethnologue publication revealed that there are only an estimated 5,000 speakers of southwestern Chippewa today. According to Dr. Anton Truer, there are less than 1,000 Ojibwe speakers in the U.S., with most residing in Minnesota and the majority in Red Lake. Those speakers from Red Lake are predominantly from the same Ponema community, with approximately 675 speakers in Minnesota and 400 from Red Lake alone. Dr. Truer estimates that there are less than 100 speakers left in other U.S. states such as Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Dakota.
A well-respected source in the linguistics field is the UNESCO Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger. In a recent UNESCO publication, it was revealed that Ojibwe in Minnesota has been listed as severely endangered after close studies of the language. In addition to being listed as severely endangered in this UNESCO publication, Ojibwe has now been defined as a language spoken by grandparents in older generations, and while the parent generation may understand it, they do not speak it to their children or among themselves.
An interesting distinction of Ojibwe that Erdrich helped reveal to all of her readers is that it does not fit with the standard 26-letter English alphabet commonly used today. There are common rules for pronunciation in Ojibwe that do indeed use the English alphabet as a base, but the language would not be possible with only the English alphabet. Another distinction within Ojibwe itself is that there are separations of dialect. For example, Ojibwe and Chippewa are heard as the same word but written differently. For example, Chippewa are both said the same way but have two different spellings as shown here. In the same way, Ojibwe sounds the same throughout both but can be shown spelled differently here.
Phrases from the Ojibwe language were featured several times throughout the stories in Love Medicine. The first example we will be looking at comes from the island, a tale that documents Lulu Nanapush's bargaining relationship with Moses Pillager, a man that has been isolated on an island for years and shares familial ties with Lulu. At the conclusion of the story, Lulu goes to live with Moses on his isolated island and becomes pregnant with his child.
In the beginning of the story, Ojibwe is mentioned frequently by Lulu as a sort of nostalgic memory. She says, "In government school, I lived by bells, flat voices, rough English. I missed the language in my mother's mouth. Sometimes I heard her. Indonis, my daughter," she consoled me. "Jiza Menemin." Her voice came from all directions, keeping me from inner harm. A few pages later, she repeats the term meaning my daughter, Indonis, my mother spoke to me, sang to me, keeping me in spite of him from deeper harm. These passages show that Lulu associates Ojibwe with her family and looks to the language as a reminder of her mother. In this way, she indirectly sees Ojibwe as a protection from the malignant American society. Her juxtaposition of rough English with the stabilizing and calming nature of her native language shows the importance of this aspect of culture in many Native Americans' lives.
Lulu's feelings of attachment to the language further exhibits itself in her attraction to Moses. When speaking of her first impression of him, Lulu notes that one summer long ago, when I was a little girl, he came to Nanapush and the two sat beneath the arbor, talking only in the old language of Ojibwe. After years in an English government school, Lulu becomes enamored with Moses and his usage of the old language, possibly due to the fact that it reminds her of her mother and thus comforts her in the thought of family. She hated the harshness of the English language, and this can be seen as a symbol of the systematic discrimination against natives embedded within American society and politics.
This sentiment is seen again when Lulu actually discovers Moses speaking their native language, saying, "I woke to find him speaking in the old language, using words that few remember, forgotten, lost to people who live in town or dress in clothes." Her thoughts of the old language and her discovery of Moses speaking it sparked similar feelings of comfort and protection. Furthermore, Lulu's mentioning of the rarity of the language and its dwindling prominence attests to the struggles of forced assimilation of natives to Euro-American culture. A language that brings Lulu serenity and connects her with her family and heritage is lost to civilized individuals, and this represents how native language and native culture in general perishes as natives are forced into Euro-American society.
Another Aldrich story that features Ojibwe language is titled Saint Marie, and centers around Marie Cashpaw and her altercations at the Sacred Heart Convent with Sister Leopolda. Similarly to the previous story, the old language connects the main character with her native roots, particularly her native religion, and this is seen in the following phrase: "Evil was the common thing I trusted. Before sleep sometimes the Dark One or Satan came and whispered conversations in the old language of the bush. I listened. He told me things he never told anyone but Indians. I was privy to both worlds of his knowledge. The Dark One supposedly talks to Marie only in the native language, and this is a crucial part of not only her culture, but her identity as well, as it shapes her desires, and specifically her resentment against Sister Leopolda and her desire to be a saint. By saying that Satan told her things he only told Indians, Aldrich describes how their native language allows them to form connections with those in their tribe. On that note, this phrase also sheds light on how language fuels a tension between the English-speaking world and the natives, as the former cannot communicate through the old language and thus cannot be trusted by the latter. The final story we will be discussing is The Beads. It's split into two parts, with part 1 being a recollection of how June took in Marie after she was abandoned in the woods by her mother, and part 2 being a description of how Rush's Bear and Marie bond as she gives birth. Again, this story alludes to how language destroys the barrier between individuals of the same tribe. This is seen when Marie is giving birth. I put my hand out and Rush's Bear put her hand into it. I turned my face away when the next one came. She did not let go. "Mama," I said to her, and knew I'd die. Rush's Bear sat across from me, and when I woke she burned tobacco, sage. She gave me some tea. I fell asleep again and woke in darkness, laboring strong. Now I clung on to their voices, all I had. They spoke to me in low tones. They told me when to hold my breath and when to let it go. I understood perfectly, although they spoke only the old language. After calling Rush's Bear Mama, she hears the voices of her ancestors and is filled with a sense of willpower that allows her to continue giving birth despite the pain and the tribulations. This speaks to the communal nature of the Chippewa tribe and most native groups in general, and this may provide a further reason as to why natives are so distrusting of Euro-American society in general, as this society focuses more on the individual as opposed to the community.
Professor Peter Beadler of Lehigh University is an expert on Erdrich's writing and has proposed an interesting theory. He believes that Erdrich includes Ojibwe phrases in her tales so that only a few readers will be able to understand their meaning, and that she hopes to prompt her readers to learn more about the old language so that they are fully able to understand the words used. This has been theorized as a mechanism for promoting the revival of the Ojibwe language in the modern world, particularly in the United States.
Going off the idea that Aldrich included Ojibwe in her writing to pass on the language for generations to come, revitalization efforts for the Ojibwe language is essential today. As noted by Dr. Troyer, language and culture go hand in hand. There are only a small population of Ojibwe speakers who conduct traditional native funerals in the Ojibwe country left. In Minnesota, where there is a notable amount of speakers, there is new funding for immersion schools and other approaches to help create new interest in the language and culture among Indians and non-Indians, and an example is shown in the picture that we will show you here.
Minnesota legislature has new legislation stating how the revitalization of American Indian languages is vitally important to preserve American Indian culture. This legislature has specifically designed programs to teach Dakota and Ojibwe languages and create more fluent speakers of the language. Because of these efforts, Ojibwe has a growing number of second language speakers. It is being taught in secondary and post-secondary schools in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ontario as part of the continuing effort to revitalize Ojibwe.
Ojibwe is a beautiful language, and its importance to the characters in Love Medicine parallels its significance to generations of Native Americans. While its status as an endangered language is saddening, hopefully this status will be changed through revitalization efforts and books such as Love Medicine that shed light on its uniqueness.